Come join me in my creative space where we can paint, learn, and have a few laughs. So get comfy and let's get started. Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be painting some wispy flowers together in a bit of a contemporary composition. And I don't know about you, but I live in a very wintry place and we just had about 30 centimeters of snow again. So I really need to see some flowers and I need to do some negative painting. I very lightly drew out just a guideline of tiny branches. They're not going to be there later. It's just to give me an idea of where I would like my flowers. And if these get in my way, then I'm going to move them. I'm going to start up here because I am right-handed and I don't want to lean in the rest of my work. I'm going to take a wet brush. I'm going to come and do 2 petals this way. So we're going to make the flower face the left. I'm using very, very, very watered down carbon black. If you have several different blacks to choose from, do a little swatch first and see, because some blacks are more on the brown side, and I wanted a gray for this, but I didn't want to mix the gray by using 2 colors because they do tend to separate, and I want these to be a true gray. So I'm just using some watered down black. And I'm doing them very, very, very translucent, but not so that you can't see them. What I will do is leave that flower is far from finished, but I don't want to touch it while it's wet because I want to layer. So I have to let that dry first. And I'm going to drop in a little bit of dark right here so I can decide that this is sort of the bottom of the petal. I think it's a good idea for me to use 2 brushes actually. It's one for wetting and one for painting. I am using a pretty pointy one in both cases. The wetting part is not necessary unless you want pointy petals. So now I would like this flower to sort of come off the edge of the page. I like that. So I'm going to do that 1 petal first so I can see where I am, because it is very difficult to see when all you have is clear water. I didn't have enough water. This is a really good exercise to practice how much water versus paint that you need. Okay, so just going to gently work that up into the end of the flower. I think this one I'm going to come to a little bit of a point, and I'm going to have a petal right here. I will wet this. I want to wet it with a pointier brush, I think. And I'll drop in some of that watery black and just let it fade off. Just putting a bit more concentrate in there, and we'll let this fade off. And if it doesn't fade like you would like it to, I mean like travel, then you're going to tickle the edges and bring the paint to where you would like it to go. Just make sure that your brush isn't more wet than what's already on the paper, because if it is, what's going to happen is you're going to make a bloom, because water pushes. So wherever there's more water, that's going to take control. So that's how you make blooms and things like that. And that is why you want to make blooms sometimes, but that's why you have to be ultra careful if you don't want them. So for example, I'm just going to put some color here just so you can see what I mean. So this is a decent amount of water, but it's not all water. Okay, and now I'm going to take some water and I'm going to put a drop. So that drop has more power, has more strength. So it's going to push the paint, the other water away, which contains your paint. Now this is kind of, if I waited one more minute, you would have seen a better example of it. But I think you can still see that this is the stronger part. So it's always going to win out. This kind of painting is good practice. It's a lot of fun to do wet on wet. It's good practice to do layering. This is, I'm going to leave this alone now. I'm going to do one right here, I think, a nice big one. So, and I don't want my petals to be too even. It doesn't, it's not what I'm looking for. So I wet 2 and I'll drop in some of the color. I'll work 2 at a time. And by putting some water here and dragging it, I can attract that paint to this side as well. So I'm going to have 3 petals here. Just tickling it because it's not traveling quite as much as I'd like it to. So I'm just tickling it over. Some colors will bloom so much easier than others, and some paint brands also will do that. I'm just dabbing up my brush, making my brush thirsty, drying it off, and I'm just taking up some of this water because there's too much, which means it has more power, so it's going to push away the paint instead of attract it. So I'm going to go in with a bit more concentrate paint in the middle here, so I have a little bit of playroom. And drying my brush off, just going to soften those edges. It will dry lighter, but it is a very pale flower. I don't want them to be too dark. I think I'm going to put a little one upside down. So this one I want it to have 3 petals. But I'm only doing the center one first. So I'll wet it, drop that paint in. If it's too much, you dry off your brush and you just tickle it along. Too dark for me. Thirsty brush. There we go. I would like to show you the difference between certain paint colors and different companies actually, but the companies, I don't have any of my core paints out right now. I do have my core paints out. So this is alizarin crimson on wet paper. You see, it just bursts. It's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And it's because they use a different binder in their paints, so they're known to flow. So if you're doing a paint where you don't want a lot of flowing, that could be an issue. Now the black I'm using is, I think it's Winsor & Newton. See the difference? It's just sitting there. Just sitting there. It's not doing anything much. It's totally different. Sometimes it's colors that do that. So in any company, the color will tend to burst. I find yellows tend to burst more, but not like the core yellow. If I could find a core yellow, you'd see the difference. I have a Queen Magenta here. See the difference? And it's the same wet paper. It's the same brush. There's nothing different. If you want this look, in a lot of your paintings, it would be worth it for you to buy the core paints, QOR, and they're beautiful. And they're The prices aren't too bad compared to Daniel Smith. I find Daniel Smith is really quite expensive. The tubes here can be $27, $28 at my art store here in Quebec, Canada. I'm using my B paper. It's 100% cotton. And this is pretty affordable paper if you can find it. It's been, Michael's used to have it. And so if you got it on sale, it was a phenomenal deal. But now they don't have it anymore. I find Michael's is they only have Canson, Strathmore, at least here. They have their own brand, which is it's more expensive than their Artist Loft brand is more expensive than Arches paper. Okay, so we'll leave that to dry. Over here, I think I'm going to do one that's not quite open. So I'll just keep doing that and I'll be right back. Okay, so most of them are dry enough that I can show you my next step. Again, I'm going to start up here. I would like to see a petal coming up over here. So I'm going to just wet this area. Now, of course, I did not blow dry this or anything, so I'm hoping that it's dry enough. I'm going to drop in the dark, starting from the bottom, like I did the other one. And you have to be pretty gentle here because you want the color to spread so you can see the layers underneath. However, you do not want to remove the paint underneath. Drying my brush off a bit just to dab this up. And the negative painting we do later is going to make these shine through. It's going to look gorgeous. I'll come over here and I am going to do the same thing. I'd like my petal to look like this or like this. I want some movement. So we know this is the center. And I'm going to come out from there and come right off the page. And just dip that in the water. Make a thirsty brush and help spread it. When you get some unusual shading, it automatically gives the petals movement, so they look like they're curving or they're bent over. And sometimes you can plan that, and other times you would say that it's the magic of watercolor. Over here, I would like a petal to come like there. So it's a bit foreshortened. There. Drop some paint in there. Dry off my brush. I don't want too much. Very, very, very delicate. So you can see that layer. You can see here now that it's drying, they're so delicate. And you can do this with any color you like. I did not want to do a traditional looking flower. So that's the only reason. I just didn't want something that has been done. I just wanted to do something different today. Okay, so this is foreshortened here. It looks like it's folded in on itself, if you know what I mean, like that. So I just added a little bit of shading there so you could see what I mean. This one, the shading was done for me. Looks like the petal is coming out from the center that way. I don't want an even amount of petals on it because I don't like this one. So what will I do? First I'll start with one. It always helps. Start there. And they don't have to overlap on both sides. I'm curious where you're all from, if you if you have winter, where you're from, where you're watching from. And if you do, then you know exactly what my frustration is. It's beautiful, but it's tiresome. It's very, very tiresome to have this snow shoveling all the time. And so I'm going to put another one right over this one, I think. Like this. It's an unusual color for a flower, I know, but when you see the next step, you'll know why I chose it. I'm going to do the same thing over here. So it's going to be the same kind of idea, except I did the center one here first. So I'm going to put these over there and that one like that. Like I said, they don't have to be exact. Okay, now for the fun part. I am going to choose two colors that I think will look nice with this gray. So I'm choosing Paranome Orange. And I'm going to choose a Marine Blue. Because blue and orange are complementary. Look at how beautiful that is against each other. Except I don't just want this marine blue. I would like it to be mixed with a bit of my phthalo blue. Now, my advice though is once you get a color you like, you really make sure that you have enough of it, because it's going to be extremely difficult to get the color again. Now that my painting is dry, I erased my initial branch lines and I redrew them, because my intention here is to leave them white. So I don't want to paint over them. I'm going to start up in this corner, and how I've arranged it is I've tried to make it so that I don't have very large spaces to fill. When you do have large spaces to fill, sometimes it's difficult to get your blending nice and even, because you must keep it all wet, evenly wet at the same time, and sometimes that's a little difficult. I see one spot here that if I'm not careful, like I can do all this in one, but then here I've got all this. So I'm going to block it off. I'm going to block it off. I think this is going to come from over here somewhere. Like that. And we can always add something later if we don't like that. But so far that's what I'm sticking with. So with a nice clean water, we're going to wet around. You don't have to go right up to your flower. Just wet the paper around. And with your precise brush, if you have a nice point, make sure your paint is nice and stirred. And drop it in the wet and outline your flower. Try not to go over your flower. And it's not wet down here, so I'm going to take my watered brush, going to wet here. So wherever the paper is wet, that's where your paint's going to want to go. And whatever pencil lines are showing later, you just erase them. And it's okay if you have different shades of this color. It would actually be encouraged. It would look pretty. And if you like, you can add some salt to the background. That would look pretty. More clean water. So have 2 jars of water if you can. 2 glasses, 2 jars, whatever you use. Try to have 2. 1 clean and 1 to rinse your brush, because if you choose strong colors, you won't be able to wet your paper with it. It'll start looking muddy if you're using colors that may complement each other, which of course make a beautiful shade of mud. So my intention here is I want some blue and I want a bit of that Paranome orange. So I think I'm going to drop in a bit of that here. Be very careful that your brush is clean. My brush was not clean. Coming down around this flower. Oops. If you do what I just did, don't panic. Just rub it off or take it off with a towel and then go back to it after. Don't try to fix it now. Okay, so I'm going to keep in mind that this orange is here, and I'm going to try to arrange it so that it looks a little purposeful. But just because that's my intention, it does not mean that's how it's going to work. So I didn't like how this one turned out, so I'm going to use this opportunity to paint over that petal that I don't like. I'm going to put some orange here, just because it's there. And I'm going to make sure you clean your brush well, because these 2 colors are going to cancel each other out and make dirt. So don't rub them together when you paint. Let them flow into each other on their own. So I'm painting right over that petal that I didn't like. So you see, you can change the shape of your petals if you didn't like what you did the first time. So you just carry on, and I will meet you at the end. Okay, so I've got the initial layer done. I just wanted you to see what it looked like. I would like to make these black. I also want to add some black centers to my flower. And as I've also, I hope for people who do watch my videos that I don't sound like a broken record, but I very rarely use black without adding something to it, because it's dull. It just is. It's the nature of the color black. So I'm taking some of that kind of teal color and I'm adding it into the black. And if you rub it along something white, you will see a hint of that color in here. I still want it as dark as black. I just don't want it dull. And so that should do the trick. So I'm using a fairly small brush, and I'll make sure that it's dried out and grab a bit of paint. And I'm going to put a few dots around the centers. It's just to make them stand out a little bit. So you decide where the centers are. So it kind of has a bit of a Japanese look to the art when this is finished. It's quite nice framed. I've done one before in different colors, and looked quite nice when it was done. So I think that's enough for that. Okay. So with a small brush, I'm going to start with a small brush anyway. I may have to go to a bigger one. I'm going to take that black that I mixed with my teal color, and I would like to start painting my stems or my branches or whatever have you. The other thing that would look quite nice is if you went around all your petals. You could go around all your flowers with something dark or white, maybe. Try not to lean in the paint that you've already put down, because this is precision work. It's really easy to lean in your paint when you are working so diligently. Well, that's a good start. So I will continue. I won't bore you with the rest, and I'll be back. Okay, so now I have all my branches done. And as I said, you could do this in any fashion you like. What I have decided to do, I tried on this one and I like it. I'm going to go around all of my flowers with some Dr. P.H. Martin bleed proof white, or you could use an acrylic, or you can use a gouache if you have. I do not have handy any of those things, and my bleed proof white is sitting here, so I am going to use that. Since I started down here, I'm just going to go around the edges in the white, and it's going to give it a bit of a different look. I'm just going around the outsides. I'm not going inside the flower. And keep your brush up at a 90-degree angle from your painting if you want your lines to be thin. Yes, I'm liking that. I'm liking that very much. So I will continue and I'll be back at the end. Okay, so I think that is it, and I can start taking the tape off. This is the exciting part. Nice clean lines. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, everyone. Thanks for watching. And if you liked it, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. And also feel free to leave me a comment. Don't be shy. I love hearing from you. Happy watercoloring. Bye-bye.